I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning with a phone call that was organised overnight. I expressed Australia's anger and concern at the death of Zomi Frankcom. Zomi was an Australian aid worker working for the World Central Kitchen, providing support for people who are suffering from tremendous deprivation in Gaza. This is someone who is volunteering overseas to provide aid through this charity. This is completely unacceptable. The Israeli government has accepted responsibility for this, and Prime Minister Netanyahu conveyed his condolences to the family of Zomi Frankcom and to Australia as a result of this tragedy. When I spoke with the Prime Minister, I emphasised the importance of full accountability and transparency, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has committed to full transparency about how this tragedy could possibly have occurred. There is a need for a thorough investigation into what happened here, and Prime Minister Netanyahu committed to that. I made clear again that it is Australia's view that humanitarian assistance must reach people in Gaza unimpeded and in large quantities. The Foreign Minister has also spoken to her Israeli counterpart. I conveyed to Prime Minister Netanyahu in very clear terms that Australians were outraged by this death, by this tragedy of this fine Australian, and I indicated to Prime Minister Netanyahu as well just some of the characteristics that I spoke with Zomi's brother about yesterday. This is an Australian who we can all be proud of, someone who not only was in Gaza assisting people in need, but had in the past provided support for people in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, here in Australia after the bushfires. This was someone who was clearly committed to benefit her fellow humanity, and someone who is whose loss is very deeply felt by her family, but I think felt by Australians as well.
Any consequences to Mr Netanyahu if his government does not change course and if it doesn't do a satisfactory investigation? In other words, have you flagged with him any actions Australia might take in relation to this or the course of the war more generally?
I indicated and confirmed what Australia's position has been over a considerable period of time. I indicated my concern with a ground invasion of Rafah and the consequences for the civilian population there. I reiterated Australia's concern at the loss of life that has occurred in Gaza. I reiterated Australia's condemnation unequivocally of the events of October 7 and of Hamas as a terrorist organisation. I indicated very clearly Australia's view, as I have in every conversation I have had with Prime Minister Netanyahu, our support for a two-state solution in the Middle East, our support for Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and security with prosperity side by side, and that was in the interests of both Israelis and Palestinians.
How do you see Australia's view? Prime Minister, overnight Benjamin Netanyahu's described this incident involving the aid convoy as something that just happens in war. How do you interpret those sort of comments? Do you think he is trying to avoid some sort of responsibility on the Israeli Defence Force's behalf by making such a remark?
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu did accept responsibility on behalf of the Australian Defence Force for this tragedy. So there was no equivocation there. But I think that Australians will look at this and be deeply, deeply concerned that someone going about their work, providing aid in an exercise of humanity, could lose their life in this way is completely unacceptable. The response of global leaders, I note the response of Prime Minister Sunak in the United Kingdom, saying he was appalled by the deaths of British citizens. President Joe Biden has said he is heartbroken by these events, and the US Secretary of State, Secretary Blinken, has called for a swift, thorough and impartial investigation into the attack, consistent with what Australia's position has been. These people are heroes. They are, as Secretary Blinken said, these are people who are providing support for people in need, at risk to themselves, people they don't know. And that is an extraordinary circumstance which has occurred. Canada's Foreign Minister has also called for full accountability, as has the United Nations. So Australia will join with all of those nations with a consistent demand for full accountability here, and we await that to occur.